Emotional health and spiritual maturity are inseparable. Emotional health and great leadership, effective leadership, are inseparable. Hey, welcome again to the Oscar Amisi Weekly Leadership Podcast, where we are passionate about equipping leaders with high capacity tools to enable them to drive societal transformation. Like we've said before, every week we'll be dropping a teaching, and if it blesses you, you like it, share it with your friends and let us know where you're watching us from. And again, I'd remind you, if you want to get some of the teachings that I'm doing in this podcast in greater detail, I want you to visit Amazon.com. Get my new book, Seed It Out, How Great Leaders Become Great Leader Makers. These will help you, will sharpen and equip you as you build other leaders around you. Let's dive into this week's podcast. Last week we introduced the art of self-leadership, character before competence, and we said effective leadership starts from self-leadership. You can't want just to lead out there and you're not able to manage yourself. We said leadership is about our person before it is about our practice. In fact, good leadership is an outflow of who we really are. We said leadership is really not a role one plays, though the role is important, but leadership for that matter is a life one lives. People don't want to see you live out what you speak. They don't want to see that in your leadership. They don't want to see you practice that even where nobody else is seeing you. And we said last week that, leadership starts from a point of us building a good and positive character, because that's who we really are. We challenged ourselves and said, let's not just build the 10% that everybody else can see, our giftings and our talents, and put all our attention on that. As good as that is, okay, you want to be a good speaker, you want to be a good singer, you want to be, to look good, but then more than that, pay attention to the 90% that is all about your character, which is who you are, the backstage of your life that really catches up with you if you don't deal with it in your front stage. Today, I want us to look at the three key practices that would help us to lead ourselves well, that will give us effective self-leadership. We introduced this last week and we said the first one is self-awareness, the second is self-alignment, and the third is self-discipline. All starting with the letter self, and intentionally so, for you not to forget, but also for you to understand that everything for you to be an effective leader starts with you as a person. Self-awareness. What is self-awareness? And why is self-awareness so important? Self-awareness is really you getting to a point whereby you have a sense of identity, a clear sense of identity. A realistic self-image of yourself based on your gifts and your personality. In fact, I dare say that you get to a point whereby you're not ignorant of who you are. That's self-awareness. It is really understanding your own internal world, having a realistic self-image, and you're not ignorant about who you really are. Because if you're ignorant of who you are, then you cannot lead. See, there's value in knowing yourself as a leader. And I challenge people and I challenge leaders out there and I say, you know what? Would you get to the practice of doing a self-audit? I'll be sharing with you a tool that I've used in my life that helps me get to be more self-aware every other time. A tool that I keep on using day in and day out. But let me give you a scripture in Proverbs 14 and verse 8. And this is what the writer of Proverbs says. He says, the wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. The wisdom of the prudent is to give thought to their ways. Giving thought is to analyze, is to think, is to process their ways. But then it says, but the folly of fools is deception. A good, prudent, wise leader gives thought to what they do, who they are. They analyze their strengths. They analyze their weak points so that they can maximize on their strengths and they can strengthen their weak points. They give thought to who they are. In self-awareness, you embark on a journey of getting to a point whereby you get to know your strengths and your gaps, and you're working to bridge those gaps. One of the most biggest benefits of being self-aware is that self-awareness brings proper confidence based on accurate self-assessment. And I'll tell you, this is so critical for any leader who wants to be effective. Proper self-assessment and periodically doing it. Asking yourself questions. Where am I strong at? Where am I weak at? Is there a way I could have done this differently? Are my weaknesses playing into my leadership? How am I leading the people that am I just projecting my weaknesses on them? Are they pushing me to be insecure? Or am I doing a better job in maximizing on my strengths and, building and bridging the gaps that I have? A lack of self-awareness for any leader on the part of a leader impacts your relationships negatively. If you're not self-aware, it will affect your relationships. It will affect those that you're leading. But on the other hand, when you are self-aware, you're able to manage relationships well, you're able to manage conflicts, you're able to motivate others, and you're also able to build your team. But when you're not self-aware, insecurity comes out. There'll be fights left, right, and center. And if you're not careful, you'll always be thinking the difficulties that you're facing as a leader are only because of the people around you. And maybe sometimes the challenges you're facing are not maybe because of the people around you. They could be emanating from you because you've not paid attention to the weaknesses that you have, or you're not self-aware. You've not done a self-assessment to see, can I work on my strengths and maximize on them? And can I get other people to help me as I bridge the gaps that I have? A leader who's self-aware, now listen to this, a leader who's self-aware knows the importance of working to build and better themselves. A leader who's self-aware knows the importance of working and to build and to better themselves. These leaders understand how critical the stability of their inner life is to their leadership effectiveness. The stability of their inner life plays a big part in their effectiveness as a leader. The only way you can give your best to your team is to work on yourself. The only way you can give the best to those that you lead, those that you're trying to develop, the best favor that you can do for them is to work on yourself as a leader. So don't just come out to say, let's improve you, while you're not working to improve yourself. It is critical for any leader to be intentional about the condition of themselves, their inner selves, to be intentional about the condition of their soul. Because when you pay attention to your inner self, to yourself, you naturally end up putting all your focus. Listen to this. When you don't pay attention to your inner self, you naturally end up putting all your focus on the externals of life. And not just externals on what people are doing out there, who they are. You only focus sometimes on their weaknesses, but you don't project that back to yourself. If you do that, you starve your inner self, you starve building yourself, and that affects those that are around you. Leaders who are self-aware are always in a good place to master their emotions. If you're self-aware, you will master your emotions. You'll be in a healthy place emotionally. If you're not self-aware, you won't be in a healthy place emotionally. Listen to a statement that was made by one of my greatest authors called Pete Scazzaro. He says this: emotional health and spiritual maturity are inseparable. I want to tweak it a little bit and say emotional health and great leadership, effective leadership, are inseparable. I believe emotional health and effective leadership are inseparable. Let me just bring to us some of the blind spots leaders who are not self-aware hit in their journey of leadership. Some of the blind spots that come to the fore for you as a leader if you're not self-aware. Number one, Leaders who are not self-aware minimize the importance of their inner life, and they put value just on their public life. So they don't work on themselves. To them, the most important thing is, how do people see me? How does the public, think about me? So they'll put their best foot forward in public, but privately, they are crumbling. They minimize the importance of their inner life and put value only on their public life. Number two, they guilt trip well-meaning people who try to speak into their life. If somebody comes and says, you know what, I need to work on this and improve on this, they become insecure. And they'll guilt trip them and even make statements like, don't you know who I am? Don't you know I am the leader? Don't you know I'm the vision bearer of this organization? You've got to do what I'm doing. So they'll guilt trip people who want to help them. Number three, they don't have space in their calendar for themselves. They are always busy. You see, because you're out to perform and not really to think about improving you as a person, you become a busybody. And sometimes we are deluded to think that the busier you are, the more effective you are. Activities are not equal to effectiveness. Sometimes you've got to take time and pause and say, can I get some me time? Because it is during those moments of me time that you analyze yourself, you do a self-assessment, you get to know what kind of a person you are, areas in your leadership that you need to improve on so that you can be good and better for those that you're leading. Leaders who are not self-aware find their worth and significance in their accomplishments and achievements rather than their relationship with God. To them, what I do, if I get accolades, that's more important. To them, the end justifies the means. They don't think about the process. It is, did I achieve what I want? It doesn't matter how I got in there, because to them, their significance is in their accomplishments, not even their relationship with God or their relationship with the people they are leading. Leaders who are not self-aware put all their focus on themselves instead of others because they're insecure. Sometimes they may be so insecure that if anybody rises up who looks to be better gifted, more gifted, or more eloquent, they'd want to push them down. So they make sure that everything is just about them. It is me, myself, and I. And even their statements are always I and I. It's never about the team. It is never about we. It is just about I and I. And lastly on that score, leadership. Leaders who are not self-aware don't receive criticism well. If you critique them, even positively to help, they think you are attacking them. So their default setting is to become defensive. Why? They are not self-aware. Such leaders have a big identity problem, and they're always working hard to impress people who are around them. I want to challenge you. Would you take some time and do a self-assessment? Would you take some time and start asking yourself, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Get even somebody that you trust who can look at you in your face and say, I think when it comes to this, you're like fish in water. But when it comes to this, you need to work a little bit harder. People who have your best interest at heart. People who can hold you accountable, who will better help you to become more self-aware. Listen to this statement from David Banner. He says, in all of creation, identity is a challenge only for humans. In other words, even animals know themselves. But when it comes to human beings, because we always want to role play and be something else, we have an issue with knowing who we are. A good self-assessment tool will help you be able to analyze yourself and be able to get to know the areas that you need to work on. Listen, as we bring this teaching to a close, I want to share with you a tool, and this is a very familiar tool that you could use. A tool that we use for organizations and for our companies, the SWOT quadrant. When we start looking at our organization, we ask ourselves, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? What are our threats? I need to tell you, you can take that and use it for you as a leader personally. And start asking yourself, just draw it, draw that quadrant and ask yourself, what are my strengths? What are the things that I'm good at? And then what are my opportunities? Things that are out there that I know if I work harder, I'll be able to achieve. Then what are my weaknesses? Where do I know I can do better, but I always find myself getting weak in that area? What are my failures? Where am I failing at? What are my threats? What are those external things that would affect my leadership if I don't pay attention to them? You take that quadrant, analyze it, put some of those things down like I told you earlier. Get a good trusted friend and put that quadrant down on a table and go through it with that friend of yours who holds you accountable. And let them look at your list and tell you, yes, I think these are your strengths, these are the opportunities you have, but this is why you're weak in your leadership. And these are the threats, if you're not careful, will affect you if you don't pay attention. A good scientific tool that will help you to be more self-aware. I'll give you another one that I use that helps me to know my personality leadership style, and that's the DISC profile. You go online and check out the DISC profile. Work on it. It will help you to get to know who you are. My challenge to you today as we bring this to a close is that be more self-aware. Get to know who you are, get to know your strengths, get to know your weaknesses. It will better your leadership. You'll be able to manage your relationships well. You will build your team better. And you'll move from a point where you're an insecure leader to a leader who's so secure in your flesh, knowing that in the areas that I'm weak, I can bring other people to help me strengthen them. Again, thank you for joining us, tuning in, and watching this week's podcast. Please like it if you can, share it with your friends, and let's meet again next week when you look at the other two key things when it comes to effective self-leadership. Again, let me remind you, if you want to get some of the teachings that I'm doing in this podcast in greater detail, visit Amazon. Get my new leadership book, Seed It Out, How Great Leaders Become Great Leader Makers. And that will help you to be one of the best leaders around who will drive societal transformation. See you again next week. God bless you.